Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Welcome. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. A by-election has been called for the Lethbridge West riding as both the UCP and NDP seek to secure the seat. We have details as to when it will be. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper has been appointed as the new board chair of AIMCO, which oversees more than $160 billion in funds. And Liberal Employment Minister Randy Boissonnault has stepped down from Justin Trudeau's cabinet.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Randy Boissonnault is leaving his post as Employment Minister in the Justin Trudeau cabinet. It comes weeks after questions surfaced about the Edmonton MP's claims of Indigenous identity. He's referred to himself as a non-status adopted Cree from Alberta, with his great-grandmother being a full-blooded Cree woman. He recently walked back the comments and said his family members belong to the Métis Nation of Alberta. Now, this followed a report by the National Post that a company he co-owned and applied for government contracts was allegedly Indigenous-owned. Sun political columnist Brian Lilly says the Boissonnault resignation is actually a bit of a surprise.
I was a bit surprised because this guy has faced allegations of doing business through his company with the government while he was sitting at the cabinet table. Didn't get removed from that. He's faced allegations that his business partner, was involved with someone who's been in a couple of major cocaine busts, not convicted, but involved. They even shared a PO box with this woman for their business. He has been accused of shady deal after shady deal and nothing until the story broke that he claimed Indigenous ancestry, and that's not true at all. And it's not just that his company claimed to have Indigenous ownership to try and get business from the government in one of these programs that's a set-aside to help Indigenous businesses. It's that he had declared himself Indigenous multiple times. The Liberal Party had described him that way. That's what finally got Trudeau to act on this. None of the other ethical breaches mattered, just that one. So I guess we now know what will get you kicked out. Being an actual Indigenous person, as Jody Wilson-Raybould said, and trying to tell the truth, that'll get you fired. It took being a fake Indigenous person for Randy Boissonnault to be fired, not all the ethical lapses.
A by-election has been called for Lethbridge West here in Alberta. Election day will be Wednesday, December 18th, with advance voting to open up on December the 10th. Lethbridge City Councillor John Middleton Hope will be representing the UCP, and former Lethbridge City Councillor Rob Miyashiro will be seeking the seat on behalf of the NDP. Middleton Hope has announced he's taking an unpaid leave of absence from his current role in City Council to focus on the campaign. Both candidates have been outdoor knocking to try and gain much support from constituents while hearing what the major issues are.
Well, the same ones that we've been featuring from the very beginning. We talk about public safety, we talk about education, we talk about healthcare, and we talk about infrastructure. These are the key pieces that people are talking about at the doors. Some want to spend a little bit more time on one particular topic, but by and large, those are the areas that most people are concerned about. This transitions our campaign into high gear, and our volunteers are out today. That's where I was this morning. That's why I'm dressed like this. We're out door to door in the freezing cold, meeting with Lethbridge constituents and spreading the good word. The Premier knows full well what my experiences are, and she is certainly in favor of leveraging that. So there's a lot of excitement about this. The MLAs are excited, the party is excited, the Constituency Association is excited about it. Folks that we encounter on the street are excited about turning this riding blue.
We're relieved, obviously, that it's finally been called, and we're really excited. Our team has done some really good work over the last 2.5 months. We've found a lot of support, and we're really ready to push forward, regardless of what the date is. Healthcare, affordability, and CPP, and education. Top 3.5 things all the time. The chaos in our healthcare system. Not enough people have family doctors. People are worried that they're going to lose their family doctors. There's a lack of specialists in town. People are waiting a long time, or they have to go to Calgary or other places to reach a specialist. You're going to see in the next few days tons of signs, campaign signs going up. We're painting Lethbridge West orange, and people are going to see how much support we really have in Lethbridge West.
And you can watch the full interviews with John Middleton Hope and Rob Mushiro on the BCN YouTube channel, also on our website, bridgecitynews.ca. The Alberta government announced that former Prime Minister Stephen Harper has been named as the new board chair for AIMCO, or the Alberta Investment Management Corporation. The agency is responsible for managing more than $160 billion in funds, including pension funds and the Heritage Savings Trust Fund. Premier Daniel Smith says with Harper at the helm, they're hoping to build the Heritage Savings Trust Fund to more than $250 billion over the next 25 years. Now, in an email statement, Alberta Finance Minister Nate Horner had this to say: Mr. Harper's almost decade-long governance experience as a G7 leader and his strong track record as a steward of tax dollars makes him the ideal candidate to serve as chairman of the AIMCO Board of Directors. The province also announced how a new program for nurse practitioners will expand access to primary health care across Alberta. Government officials say through the Nurse Practitioner Primary Care Program, 33 nurse practitioners are now practicing independently in communities across the province. Those include communities such as Coaldale, Picture Butte, Three Hills, Vegreville, and Vermilion. Health Minister Adriana LaGrange says nurse practitioners are vital to our healthcare system here in Alberta.
Nurse practitioners provide primary care services that include diagnosing health conditions, ordering and interpreting test results, prescribing medications, and referring patients to specialists. The program provides compensation for nurse practitioners so that they can practice comprehensive patient care autonomously and operate their own practices. Or they can practice autonomously in existing primary care settings.
Minister LaGrange adds that with the 33 nurse practitioners working independently, around 30,000 more Albertans will receive access to the primary health care that they need. Thanks to a $750,000 investment, the Brooks Healthcare Centre now houses 14 new beds. Officials with Alberta Health Services say that includes 9 long-term care beds and 5 beds that support palliative care along with convalescent care. Trevor Inaba with AHS says there was a real need in Brooks for more beds.
I think as we look at the demographics and just some of the need for the long-term care side and additional capacity within the community, that's where we had worked with the community and identified the need, and we're fortunate to be able to bring that to reality. We've got staffing complement, so we're able to increase our staffing team to support the 14 additional beds. So that's been great. And then on the actual build side of things, we are definitely grateful for the community of Brooks and the Brooks and District Health Foundation that partnered with us, and truly grateful for their generosity in helping us bring this to reality.
The AHS says the Brooks Health Centre has a total of 24 long-term care beds, 28 acute care beds, 9 subacute beds, and 10 beds in the emergency department. Well, it was a chilly and overcast day for much of southwestern Alberta again today. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, some of those clouds will also bring us more snow again soon?
Yeah, well, I was even seeing a light dusting of flurries earlier this afternoon. Nothing that stayed on the ground, but tonight we're looking at more periods of snow beginning. So that'll be overnight, right around 2 o'clock in the morning. That's when those periods of snow should begin. They should last right up until Thursday, just before noon time. And we are also looking at an overnight low this evening of -11, daytime high tomorrow of -9. And with these lower temperatures, it's kind of nice that we're not also contending with the wind. So we're only seeing a 15-kilometer-per-hour wind on a Thursday. And you know what? I'll be back later on in the show to give you that 7-day forecast as well as the national forecast.
I should have given her my jacket. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wrapped up meeting with G20 leaders in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. According to Canadian press reporter Dylan Robertson, he discussed the war in Ukraine, how to tackle world hunger, and how Canada is championing nuclear energy.
Some of the main moments of the summit have been about Ukraine. We know that Canada is pushing very strongly to condemn Russia for its invasion, but Russia is a member of the G20. And while Vladimir Putin did not show up, he did send his foreign minister, and the communique was really a lot less strict language on Ukraine than what we saw at the last 2 summits. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told us that he was quite upset about that. He felt like it needed to be stronger and call out Russia directly. This summit is really crucial for Canada as it negotiates a world that's in flux. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau talked a lot about how it's not just inflation, but war, climate change, a whole lot of issues that the world is facing right now, and the importance of coming together to try to set some common rules and follow an international system instead of everyone out for themselves. He said that that's a shared challenge and that Canada is actually planning to export nuclear energy technology to different countries. We already have a reputation around the world for having good nuclear reactors, especially ones that you can't use to create weapons. And now he's looking to double down on that and work in Southeast Asia and a lot of other regions to try to advance, Canadian exports, but also to help these countries. We know that almost half the population of Africa does not have consistent electricity, and it's a huge issue for their economies.
After the White House gave the go-ahead, Ukrainian armed forces launched projectiles from a U.S.-supplied Army tactical missile system battery deeper into Russia's territory than previously permitted. According to our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari from the Foreign Desk, this could be a very dangerous precedent.
This is a very dangerous way to escalate the war, A, and B, to close out the Biden administration's basically their legacy in this war. I don't know what this was for, but Ukraine obviously didn't waste any time taking the United States up on the offer, and Russia didn't waste any time threatening them back. So now we are waiting here, wondering if this will lead to a huge escalation. Many people are calling it the beginnings of World War III.
Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will also discuss how the incoming Trump administration will be moving forward with hard sanctions against Iran in an effort to destabilize the Islamic Republic regime's funding of proxy wars. That's coming up later in our broadcast. It's so difficult to think that there are people in this world who intentionally want to hurt children. Sadly, we've covered a number of those stories right here on Bridge City News, some of which have taken place right here in Lethbridge. But thankfully, we have an organization that helps those who've been victims of sexual assault. Christine Cassie, CEO of the Chinook Sexual Assault Centre, shares some surprising stats on sexual assaults committed against kids here in Canada.
What we know from the stats, both from a prevalence study that was done through the Alberta Association of Sexual Assault Services and stats that we get through policing agencies and child welfare agencies across Canada, is that it impacts about 1 in 3 kids. And so we look at a 34% prevalence rate really for child sexual abuse alone. In the city of Lethbridge, that would mean about 6,800 kids that may be impacted by some form of sexual abuse or some sort of sexual violation. So these are really staggering numbers that we're dealing with. We also know that this is one of the leading issues that leads to, when the trauma hasn't been resolved, that leads to sexual assault later in life. So there's a direct connection of what's going on here.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Christine Cassie from the Chinook Sexual Assault Centre and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our program. The City of Lethbridge is now accepting grant applications for hosting events, initiatives, and programs to boost vibrancy in the downtown core. The Reimagining Downtown Grant will provide successful applicants with funding to revitalize vacant or underused public spaces. Now, this year, the city expanded the boundaries of available spaces into 13th Street and the Warehouse District east of downtown.
We funded probably about 12 or 13 events in the last year, and for this year, for 2025, we'll have $120,000 to give out. So a maximum of $10,000 per event outside of Galt Gardens, and a maximum of $15,000 for events inside of Galt Gardens. 13th Street North and the Warehouse District were added to the scope of the grant area because it was in the heart of our city master plan as one of the approved areas. It's more or less to attract activities, which in turn has a trickle-down effect of adding more exposure to businesses in the downtown.
Officials say there will be $120,000 in funding available for successful applicants. Applications are now open until December 31st, and events and successful applicants will be rewarded in January. Many people feel that adoption is more than just expanding a family. It's a work of love that gives many children the opportunity to have hope, a home, and a stable life full of love. BCN's Heidi Echevarria speaks with the Alberta Minister for Children and Family Services, Cyril Turton, who talks about the importance of adoption.
Being able to provide a home for children is a beautiful and noble act that allows children to live a healthy life. November is Adoption Awareness Month. In that same spirit, and as Minister for Children and Family Services, Cyril Thornton set an example of what you can do to contribute to this beautiful cause.
To me, that is one of the joys of my ministry. And as someone that went through the adoption process, I have experienced that firsthand. And it's my dream that many more Albertans can also experience the joys of adding to their family through adoption. My youngest son is adopted. He's 11 years old now. I experienced firsthand the whole process of going through that as an adopted parent. Well, adoption provides a loving and stable home for a child. And for so many children, they may not know what that's like. And I know that for adopted parents, they can provide that stability because we know that for children to thrive and to grow, they need a stable environment.
According to the Children's Aid Foundation of Canada, approximately 2,000 children under the care of child welfare agencies in Canada find a new home with an adopted family every year. In Alberta, a large number of families joined in 2023 in this beautiful way to give love. This is not one of the actions in which you give and do not receive. Because in adoption, whoever seeks to give love also receives love in a great way and automatically.
Last year, there were just over 700 families here in Alberta that went through the adoption process. And I received many of those stories as Minister of Children and Family Services about the positive benefits and impacts that it has had on their individual families. And so within the province of Alberta, within government care, there's about 35 children that are looking for homes. But I know internationally as well, and I know many families go that route. There's many more children that are willing to be adopted into the homes of Albertan families. My message to families across Alberta is that there's a child looking for a home. And I, as a Minister of Children and Family Services, I'm actively looking for families that are willing to step up and to start that process to provide a forever family for a young child. And if they haven't looked at adoption up to this point, just know that it's a viable option. We have some amazing tools within the province of Alberta to help support adopted families that have gone through the process in both pre and post adoption support. So please just know that there's a child looking for a home, and I'm hoping that an Albertan family will be able to step up to that call.
Resources about the starting adoption process, appointments, home studies, and more information can be found at Alberta government website. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
A nice story to warm your heart. Well, we need some of that warmth here in southwestern Alberta. It's been cold and snowy, and more snow is on the way. Complete weather details are on deck. It has been quite chilly here in Lethbridge and overcast as well. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, the colder temperatures will remain, and we may see more flurries in the forecast again soon?
Yes, overnight, those periods of snow should begin right around 2 o'clock in the morning and last up until Thursday, just before noontime. Daytime high tomorrow of -9. We're still seeing those very chilly, frigid overnight temperatures, seeing temperatures down into the minus teens, minus double digits. Oh, it's chilly. That means we're going to see wind chill tomorrow morning of -17 before we get to that -9. By the way, we're not out of the woods quite yet once that snow ends at noon, because it's going to start up again Thursday night. Snow expected again on Friday, and then Saturday periods of snow as well. -9 on Saturday, -12 on Sunday, -5 on Monday, and then back to 0 for next Tuesday. That's more like it. Okay, so the average high for this time of year keeps getting lower and lower. 2 is the average high now, -9 the average low. 18 was our record high on this day, happening back in 1908, and in 1921 it was a very chilly -29. Okay, sun rose this morning at 7:52. We'll see that sun set this afternoon at 4:42 p.m. So we're seeing 8 hours 50 minutes of daytime light today. Sun the sun time is so much shorter these days. Okay, so we're looking to the west coast tomorrow, seeing a 30% chance of showers early in the morning in Victoria at 9 for a high. There were some high storm surges earlier today, but that should be ending this evening. 9 for the high in Vancouver tomorrow, -9 in Edmonton with a 30% chance of flurries. 2 to 4 centimeters of snow expected tomorrow in Calgary with also a high of -9. As we look to the rest of the prairies, by the way, all the prairies seeing those -teen temperatures, particularly with that morning wind chill, but a daytime high tomorrow of -11 in Saskatoon. 30% chance of flurries expected there. Regina, mainly cloudy, -10, and mainly cloudy also in Winnipeg tomorrow with a high of -4. As we look to the central part of the country, Toronto seeing some showers, 30% chance there, 6 for the high. 6 also the expected high tomorrow in Ottawa. Ottawa, lots of rain though. Lots of rain, 10 to 15 millimeters expected there, and 5 millimeters of rain expected to fall tomorrow in Montreal with a high of 8 degrees. As we look to Atlantic Canada, seeing more precipitation, 30% chance of showers in both Fredericton and Halifax tomorrow. Fredericton sitting at 8, Halifax at 10. 7 for the high in Charlottetown, a 60% chance of showers there, and 60% chance of showers also in St. John's with fog dissipating in the afternoon and winds up to 60 kilometers per hour, high of 7 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
2 Canadian companies have been named in separate frozen potato price-fixing lawsuits south of the border. McCain Foods Limited and Cavendish Farms are 2 of the companies accused of being part of a potato cartel, conspiring with other large potato processors by sharing pricing data in an effort to raise the price of frozen potatoes in the United States. The 2 other companies named in the class action lawsuits are U.S. companies Lamb Weston Inc. and J.R. Simplot Co., along with an industry association called the National Potato Promotion Board. Now, one of the class action complaints was filed in an Illinois court on November 15th. The other was filed also in an Illinois court on November 17th. The class actions have yet to be certified. The union representing port supervisors in British Columbia is formally challenging the legal and constitutional authority of the federal labor minister ordering them back to work. In a legal document dated Tuesday, the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Local 514 is questioning whether the order issued by Labor Minister Steve McKinnon violates the protected charter rights to collective bargaining and the right to strike. The union says the questions will be considered by a panel of the Canada Industrial Relations Board on December 9th and 10th. The federal government is facing a similar challenge by the union representing Montreal port workers who were ordered back to work after being locked out. According to an insurance crime and fraud prevention group, Equine Association, the Toyota Highlander was the most stolen vehicle last year. The popular SUV dethroned Honda CR-V as the nation's top stolen vehicle for 2 years in a row. The Dodge Ram 1500 series, Lexus RX series, and Toyota RAV4 also made the list. The most popular stolen vehicles in Canada share similarities. Most are 2019 or newer model years and have vulnerabilities that come from keyless ignitions or were without anti-theft devices that matched national standards. The federal government says around 90,000 cars are stolen each and every year in Canada, and many of the thefts involve connections to organized crime. Canada's private auto insurers paid out a record high $1.5 billion in theft claims in 2023. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 25 points on the day to finish at 25,036. The Dow was up 139 points to 43,408. The S&P 500 was up 1/7 of a point to 5917, and the Nasdaq was down 21 points to finish at 18,966. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 52 cents to 68.87 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 22 cents to 3.22 US. Gold was up 15.13 to 26.5012 US an ounce, and silver was down 44 cents to $30.84 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.21 per bushel. Barley is at $6.31. Canola is at $14, and corn is at $7.54 per bushel. Live cattle December contract was down 28 cents to $186.30. Feeder cattle were up 55 cents to $254.80. Lean hogs December contract was up 98 cents to $80.53, and the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours at 71.60 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, a by-election has been called for Lethbridge West. Election day will be Wednesday, December the 18th. Lethbridge City Councillor, who recently announced an unpaid leave of absence from City Council, John Middleton Hope, will be representing the UCP, and while former Lethbridge City Councillor Rob Miyashiro will be seeking the seat on behalf of the NDP. With Ukrainian military now using a U.S.-supplied Army tactical missile system battery against Russia, could that lead to World War III? Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will share her thoughts with us momentarily. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. As the war between the Israel Defense Forces and Hezbollah continues in Lebanon, comes word from the Jewish state that Russian arms have now been found in the bunkers of the terrorist group. To chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, who joins us from the Foreign Desk in Los Angeles. Lisa, Israel is quite concerned with this recent find since these weapons appear to be more modern and numerous than what was originally believed to be possessed by the Islamic Republic-backed terrorist group.
Right. And it just shows the very tangled web of rogue nations of the world uniting as they have over the last 4 years, helping each other out, not only in skirting sanctions, not only in really doing away with the isolationism that has been created by the West, but really bringing each other back into being more relevant and also helping with the various wars. So we have the Islamic Republic of Iran selling weapons to Russia, Russia helping the Islamic Republic, buying oil. Again, the circle continues. And now with Israel finding Russian-made weapons, we know that there is more collaboration between these entities. And to what end, right? To what end will Iran's regime stop putting its money, its resources into terrorism, into its terror proxies, to continue really harassing and terrorizing the small state of Israel, the state the size of New Jersey, the only Jewish state in the world, one of the only democratic nations of the Middle East, our ally in the Middle East, but yet it finds itself encircled by these terror proxies that are funded by Iran's regime that is now getting help, obviously, from China, Venezuela, Russia, and other rogue nations.
The Biden administration, Lisa, is allegedly urging Senate Democrats to oppose pending legislation and seeks to block about $20 billion in military aid to Israel. Now, supporters of the restrictions say that Jerusalem has not really done enough to reduce civilian casualties in Gaza. Since the start of the war in the region in October of last year, Congress has granted Israel close to $18 billion in assistance.
Right, and that assistance is because Israel is fighting a war for the rest of the world. It is fighting a war against radical terrorism, which would kill any single one of us on a good day. What the world is very much caught up on, and this is just promoted by the various acronymed organizations like the UN, by the media, of course. We're seeing so many different media outlets, besides for yours, of course, that are pushing this myth that Israel is causing a genocide. Now, of course, there are casualties. We don't want any casualties on any side. But we also have experts that tell us that they've been on the ground and that Israel is doing everything in its power, not only to remove innocent civilians from harm's way, to make these attacks completely pinpointed, as pinpointed as possible, I should say. But there's always going to be collateral damage. There's always going to be human shields. In the case of Hamas and Hezbollah, creating these terror tunnels and keeping hostages in places where there are civilians, actually keeping hostages with civilian families. And that brings them all into the fray as well. But this is a myth that just continues on and on. Just for some numbers, because we want to have just statistical evidence of all of this, the population, both in Gaza and the West Bank, has increased exponentially over the last few decades. And not only that, since October 7th. So imagine that, even with all the casualties, there is a bump up in the population. So that is the opposite of a genocide. That is an increase in population. And I will always end with this. I will always have this sentiment. If we truly care about the Palestinian people, as many of us do, we would like to see them rid themselves of any terror elements within their society so that they could actually have a chance So the Palestinian people, as many of them have in a very brave way, should stand up against Hamas. They should stand up against Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They should stand up against terrorism and radicalism in their schools, in their homes, in their mosques, wherever they find it, so that they actually have a chance to grow, have their children grow, and move away from this radicalism.
The leadership in Qatar, Lisa, says the Hamas office in Doha has not been closed, but it's inactive, and the whereabouts of the leadership of the terrorist group is, quote, uncertain at this time.
Yes, so there were conflicting reports saying that, yes, Qataris asked Hamas to leave. I mean, this was perhaps in reaction to a Trump win, to say, well, there will be, obviously there's more deterrence coming from the West. They're not going to stand for this. Obviously, a loss of the war for Hamas and closing their doors. I'm assuming they don't have neon lights outside to say open or have it be off. So we have no way of knowing, besides believing them, that they have not shut down operations. Other reports were saying that they have opened up shop now in Turkey. The truth is they're moving throughout the Middle East. They have operatives everywhere, hiding in many places because they are cowardly and won't stand up and live in the places where they are ruling. They are billionaires, Hal. So when we see reports of Palestinian people starving, that they should demand answers from their leadership. They have many billionaires among their leadership, and of course they are using and abusing the aid and the money that comes in and not passing it along to the Palestinian people. We saw that with the trucks that were looted. We see that with the aid that is hoarded and not given to the people, the Palestinian people. So here we have another he said, whether or not they have an actual storefront in Qatar or in Turkey or both, we don't know.
And Qatar's foreign ministry spokesperson says Hamas officials are no longer interested in negotiating a ceasefire in Gaza. Lisa, is that because perhaps many of the hostages are no longer alive?
Right. So, I mean, when were they truly ever really interested in a ceasefire? If they were, we would have had one already. We're already 1 year past the war. And of course, over 100 hostages still being held, which is the most mind-boggling part. These are innocent civilians from all over the world, by the way, Hal. There are Americans among them as well. And by the reports that I am seeing from the Office of the Ministry in Israel, they believe that 50, about half, are still alive, and about half have perished in the hands of Hamas. Obviously, a single life is worth saving, and Israel does believe that. The one thing I will say is, despite the reports that we see here in the West, the one thing that all Israelis, left, right, and center, even those who are against Bibi, those who stand with Bibi Netanyahu himself, they have a priority in this war to get the hostages home, and they will do whatever it takes. So every time they've gone back to the negotiating table, it hasn't worked out. The terrorists make huge demands that just cannot be met. And in this case, there was another ceasefire demand this week, and I think part of the small font that the Hezbollah and Hamas did not agree to was that if Israel finds itself in a precarious situation, they have the right to defend themselves, and that just was a no-go for them. So, I mean, you can understand what the Israelis are up against in fighting these terror proxies.
Absolutely. And Iran has promised to cap its stock of near weapons-grade nuclear fuel on the condition, Lisa, that no censure resolution will be issued next week of the UN nuclear watchdog. This coming from a Reuters report.
Yes, it's an interesting time for the Iran regime to be making concessions. This is them trying to play nice when we know that they have never held to any of the stipulations by the watchdog group. This is the UN's arm that controls nuclear proliferation. So the Iran regime has shut off its cameras, more than 27 cameras. The centrifuges keep spinning. They have enriched uranium above the allotted percentage amount. And here we are. And they are now making this last hour effort to please the inspectors, not to issue censure. But just this morning, we saw the EU issue fresh sanctions against Iran's regime. And we know the incoming administration here in the United States has already said that they will pursue a policy of maximum pressure once again on the Iran's regime, which does mean maximum pressure and sanctions on the important sectors of Iran's regime, including its nuclear weapons and weapons proliferation in general.
And speaking of U.S. government officials, Lisa, after the White House gave the go-ahead, Ukrainian armed forces launched projectiles from a U.S.-supplied Army tactical missile system battery deeper into Russia's territory than previously permitted. Will this help turn the tide of the war?
I mean, who knows? I don't think this is going to do it, but it will absolutely escalate things, and that's what everyone is afraid of. This is a very dangerous way to escalate the war, A, and B, to close out the Biden administration's basically their legacy in this war. I don't know what was for, but Ukraine obviously didn't waste any time taking the United States up on the offer. And Russia didn't waste any time threatening them back. So now we are waiting here, wondering if this will lead to a huge escalation. Many people are calling it the beginnings of World War III. Obviously, when nuclear arms are being threatened, and that option is on the table for Putin, who is a madman in many ways, that obviously still is something that we should be fearful of. At the same time, the Biden administration is doubling down on its support of Ukraine, giving more money and weapons to Ukraine in the final weeks of their presidency.
Yeah, Lisa, let's talk about what government officials are doing in the United States. There are reports surfacing that the Pentagon will send Ukraine around $275 million in new weapons as the Biden administration rushes to do as much as it can to help Kyiv fight back against Russia before Trump takes office in January.
Yeah, if 275 million was going to do the trick, I think it would have done it a long time ago. And I know, I am not pro Putin, and I'm not suggesting that, the Ukrainians just, surrender and let this go. But it doesn't have to be one or the other. And at this point, where's the diplomacy in all of this? What has the Biden administration done to de-escalate rather than escalate to a point where the Ukrainians still cannot overcome this challenge? So if it's $275 million of taxpayer money and you're only escalating the war, you're only setting the Ukrainians further back, you're creating more casualties. And what happens then? Putin is now able to flex his muscles more, make more threats, and advance. Ultimately, they will advance because they have the justification of and the fear that the Ukrainians are shooting further and further into Russia. So it's a dangerous move, and I think one that will not have the outcomes that the Biden White House is thinking that it will have or praying that it will have. I think it's a dangerous way to close out this presidency. And at the same time, I do wonder what will happen once that diplomacy or a different type of foreign policy comes into play January 20th when Trump comes into office. And he does have a relationship with Putin and perhaps does have something in mind in terms of offering Putin an off-ramp to end this very, very senseless war.
Yeah, praying it comes to an end very soon. Lisa, here's some news that kind of hits close to home for you. Los Angeles City Council voted unanimously to codify a sanctuary city ordinance into the municipal law that'll protect illegal immigrants in your city from being deported by President-elect Donald Trump.
Anytime there's a chance to just step all over democracy, leave it to Los Angeles to be the first to take that order. Yes. Look, we don't even know what's going to happen. We don't know. We know that Trump does want to make this country safer, wants to create a more legalized immigration system. He has said he will deport a certain number of migrants, but we don't know what that means. Is he going after the gangs? Is he going after certain individuals that have come up on threat lists? Which we've covered that at the Foreign Desk. I mean, how many thousands of people have come up on questionable lists, whether it's a terror list or it's most wanted list, or they belong to gangs from their country of origin. Look, it's too soon to say, but to say that we will absolutely not abide by the law or by the President of the United States sets a very dangerous precedent. It's anti-American, it's anti-democracy, and of course, very, very LA. So we shall see what will happen.
I don't know if you've seen this, but it's making the rounds on social media right now. It's gone viral. The map of the different states, the blue versus red states, and the states that didn't require any photo ID or any ID whatsoever that went to the Democrats. I have to investigate further to find the legitimacy behind this. Have you seen that as well?
I have, and I think it's important right now for a lot of Americans who find themselves on the left to just study what has happened, to study the trends, and not to say things like most Americans want to leave the country, or I saw, a celebrity say something like, I'm leaving the country and I feel bad for most Americans who can't. Well, most Americans, if we're defining the word most as more than half, voted for the man who's coming into office. So, I mean, it's such an ignorant and out of touch, entitled and privileged comment. If the Democrats as a party, and I'm talking about even the ones who find themselves more center, don't learn from this referendum, don't learn from this wake up call, this will continue to happen from local elections all the way up to the presidency. And that is because average Americans, wherever they find themselves, we're talking about women groups, we're talking about minority groups, we're talking about gays, we're talking about African Americans, we're talking about Mexican Americans. There's so many other a minority or smaller interest groups that voted for President Trump. And there's a reason for that. And we need to get to the bottom of it. What is it that Americans crave? They want common sense politics. They want a better economy. They want safe borders. They want their children to be safe. They don't want indoctrination in schools. And these are the things that really we have to come together as a country and unite around. I mean, what we see in the media is a fringe group of California and New York Democrats who want to control the narrative, and it's so passé. I mean, it is completely passé. The rest of most Americans, to quote the celebrities, don't want that, and they don't think like that, and that's not what they want for their children. And it's time that we listen and we come to a consensus on what most people want.
U.S. political reporter and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from the City of Angels.
Thank you so much for having me.
Child abuse isn't something we typically like to talk about, but I think we can all agree it needs to stop. Joining us today is Christine Cassie. She is the CEO of Chinook Sexual Assault Center in Lethbridge. Christine, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate having you on.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. First off, can you maybe give us a brief overview of what the Chinook Sexual Assault Center does?
Well, the Chinook Sexual Assault Center has two main programs. One is the Sexual Assault Center, which provides a range of services from crisis intervention to therapy, including peer support groups, what we call system navigation. So sometimes people's lives just aren't going as well as what they'd hope they'd be because they're dealing with the impacts of the trauma that they're experiencing. So we'll help negotiate their way through certain systems that they want to deal with. We also provide specialized police and court support as well. So for those people who do want to go forward to report to police, because there's no statute of limitations in Canada, we will support them through that process all the way through to the court process with that as well. Beyond that, we also have our signature program, the Child and Youth Advocacy Center, which is also called Chinook. Can never use that name enough, it seems. Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Center deals with children 0 to 17 years of age that have been identified through children's services or through policing services throughout southwestern Alberta that have been abused, and either sexually abused, severe physical abuse, or severe neglect, or have been exposed to domestic violence. And so we actually broker the child forensic interviews to be done in a child-friendly, culturally sensitive space that we host, as well as then supporting the non-offending family members and the child throughout the court process and how they learn to heal through therapy and other resources that we have here.
Well, pretty heavy stuff that you're dealing with over there, Christine, for sure. Like I said earlier, child abuse, of course, isn't a topic we love to talk about, but you believe that it is, in fact, important to have those conversations about the issue.
Absolutely. What we know from the stats, both from a prevalence study that was done through the Alberta Association of Sexual Assault Services and stats that we get through policing agencies and child welfare agencies across Canada, is that it impacts about 1 in 3 kids. And so we look at a 34% prevalence rate really for child sexual abuse alone. In the city of Lethbridge, that would mean about 6,800 kids that may be impacted by some form of sexual abuse or some sort of sexual violation. So these are really staggering numbers that we're dealing with. health. We also know that this is one of the leading issues that leads to when the trauma hasn't been resolved, that leads to sexual assault later in life. So there's a direct connection of what's going on here. We also know those that have had that exposure to domestic violence, they're seeing that violence in their home, that they're living this out day after day, that this also leads to other behaviors and things that absolutely impact then, how they respond to others as they grow into adult life and how they receive others. So what those healthy relationships may look like. And so our ability to be able to identify, to address, to intervene, we need to do, because if we don't deal with that trauma early, we know that we're setting up for a lifelong struggle.
What are some of the signs that a child may be experiencing abuse? What should we be looking for?
If you're an outsider looking in, sometimes what you may see is, certainly if it's physical abuse, you might see some bruising that really can't be explained on what that is. You might see some withdrawal behaviors are happening where they're not part of their regular or normal activities. You may see disassociation when they're in a school setting where they aren't able to focus. That could be for anything from physical abuse to domestic violence or sexual violence that's happening in the home. But you're going to see these changes in behaviors that are happening that way. For kids that are neglected, you may see that they don't have the proper clothing, they don't have the proper food to eat, things like this. You might see them losing a lot of weight, whatever that might be, and just in a state of neglect in that way. For others, you're seeing them as lost and not really doing so well because they aren't necessarily having those emotional connections where they need them. For any of us looking in, it's important to ask some questions about what's going on. Do you need anything? What might I be able to help with? Asking about how that what's going on. And certainly we see teachers are great for this in being able to recognize things. Schools are a big factor in a child's life, and they help to identify when these types of things are going on. Family members too sometimes get really concerned and will make those calls, those very difficult calls to make. But we know when you make that call, if we can get in, an assessment can be done, we can intervene early. And it doesn't mean that the family is going to be necessarily torn apart. It may mean that they're getting the resources they need to be able to work through some very difficult times, to learn some different behaviors. Some of us grew up in a time where spanking was, pretty much, that was the only parenting style. And although some of us, we may joke about it now, it's really not acceptable anymore to do that. There's other ways that we can parent and discipline our kids, and how we can put healthy boundaries in place to help people, progress. Beyond that is looking at who's having access to our kids and how do we identify when our child might be being groomed. How to identify when our family is being befriended because someone wants to have access to our children in that way. And so knowing some of those signs and what to look for is really important. And again, just knowing that, people are a call away and they really do want to help with that. And that both is through the Sexual Assault Center, the Child and Youth Advocacy Center, and a number of other resources that we have in the city of Lethbridge.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned a lot of things there. And of course, it can manifest itself in a number of different ways. Like you were mentioning neglect. I mean, it doesn't just come in the form of physical abuse. So what are some of the main types of child abuse?
Really, we see the predominant thing that we see is actually sexual abuse, which is, probably the scariest of them all. If you talk to people, this is what they shy away from talking the most about, is that this can happen to those that are under the age of 18, and it happens to people of all ages. And it's, people do prey on the vulnerable. And the more vulnerable we are, and children certainly meet that criteria of being vulnerable, there is there are predators that are looking for that. So for us to be able to break that cycle, I'm sorry, to answer your question. So sexual abuse is the main one we're seeing. We're also seeing physical abuse. We're seeing a lot of exposure to domestic violence in this area, emotional neglect and neglect. So those are the 5 primary areas that we're seeing. And again, we deal mostly with the sexual abuse, the severe physical abuse, and the neglect.
Yeah, you were mentioning before some stats there. I'm just curious, how prevalent is it in our society? Did you say 6,800 cases locally in the region?
I said that's what the 34% would work out to when we look at the population of children in the city of Lethbridge. So it is a 34% prevalence rate for sexual abuse itself, let alone for other forms of abuse. But it is almost 1 in 3 children that are experiencing some form of abuse in our society. So it is quite high when we're looking at this. And again, we see the same thing when we look at adults when it comes to sexual assault. It is quite high. And so there's lots of ways that we can intervene and that we need to intervene and really see this and have these fruitful conversations so that people can take the topic seriously and to make those reports, even when they're feeling, I don't want to get involved. We know we all don't want our neighbors to be mad at us or to have that, awful situation, but we always have to put those children first.
Yeah, we kind of have a role as individuals in society to help. Almost like it takes a village to raise a child. It's kind of true in that case, isn't it?
It's absolutely true. I mean, first, it is legislated that we are supposed to doing that. There is, fines that you can receive if you fail to, if you knowingly neglect reporting child abuse that's happening. They rarely take issue with that, but I think morally we have that obligation. And very much like you said, it is a village that raises a child, and we have to be looking out for each other in this society if we really want to make those changes.
Right. Christine, about a year ago or so, the Chinook Sexual Assault Center opened a new facility for the Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Center. So maybe tell us about some of the features of this new facility and why it's important.
Fantastic. Yes, so this is actually based on 40 years of evidence-based research. It actually originated out of Alabama and is widely used throughout the world, but predominantly in North America. So we're one of, I want to say, 8 child and youth advocacy centers in the province. What a child and youth advocacy center does is that it actually brings all those very messy pieces from police reporting or children's services, the medical exams, the need for psychologists, the school system, all together so that we can actually look at a case of child abuse. We call them triaging child abuse and seeing what those needs are. We can actually walk them through prepare them for a child forensic interview. So there's a process for that. And then actually work on those pathways to treatment and to healing for the child and the family. So the work isn't done independent of the family. It's done with the family, with the child for it to be most successful, and then to see them successfully through the court case. Where the child interview becomes really critical is that quite often children had to tell their story not one time, but several times. So they may be telling it to the doctor, they may be telling it to the police, they may be telling it to children's services. And every time that they're having to tell their story, they're being re-traumatized in that abuse that they've suffered. So having a really well-constructed child forensic interview is paramount to the success of the court case. And so at the end of the day, hopefully you have more people that are able to be convicted of these crimes, which again helps to mitigate those risks to other children. So part of that is we'll identify one interviewer for that child. And if, let's say, if it's police doing the interview, children's services would sit in a monitoring room and be able to get their notes at exactly the same time of what this is. When the tape is really well done, that tape then can be submitted to court as evidence. The child doesn't have to go into court to state what the abuse was. They still have to be cross-examined, but they don't have to state again what they went through. So again, you limit the number of times the child has to speak directly to the type of abuse that they endured.
Right. That's amazing. And that's the case with any victim that has to go through this again and again. Is there any thoughts on that happening for anybody that's been through a horrific situation?
Absolutely. Well, even, there's always a misnomer when people think that they have to come to a sexual assault center, they have to tell us all the details of the sexual assault, and you don't. We aren't secondary witnesses to the crime. We know it's horrible. We believe you, and we just want to know how you're doing and how you need to get to that next step of where you want to be. So that's what we're here for. And so I think there is, police are much more trauma informed than what they were before on this. And so this is why this model is widely adopted throughout North America. Is we want to do better by the kids, and we know if we can do better with the children, we're going to do better with the adults in time. That we're actually going to circumvent children growing up to being abused yet again and again, or the possibility that other harm is going to be done to other people. And so these are those ways to actually mitigate those types of risks in our society and to help people really thrive, because everyone needs that fair shot to make it through life and to be contributing citizens. So
definitely.
Yeah.
What about the work that you're doing to prevent abuse from happening? Are you working kind of with the parents that have sort of been doing this, or is it more of a let's get in front of the issue before it even gets there?
I guess there's two different ways that we
Yeah.
work with things. When it comes to the Child and Youth Advocacy Center, the work is done with the non-offending parent and the family members that are connected with that child for that support. And again, how they're attaching with that child, how they're supporting that child, if there's other children who've been abused in the home as well, and how they're going to, reconstruct their lives after this, and how to move forward with that and what those child needs are. And so that's that therapy process. So both through some Connect parenting groups that are done, and some other groups that are done, as well as some therapy that is done by the folks that we have here. The other side is that there's an early intervention program that we have that's called Who Do You Tell, which we take out to schools. And it's a 1 hour program. We go in and we talk about, who do you tell if something is going on in your life that, is pretty scary. And so the difference between keep and speak a secret. So the keep secrets are, the fun surprise birthday party that's coming up. The speak secrets are the ones that are causing harm, that are making you feel awful inside. And sometimes telling their parents may not be the safest person in their life to tell, right?
Sad but
And
true. Yeah.
Sad but true. And we've seen this happen in, athletic programs with gymnastics and things like this. It might be a coach that's doing something or a player on a team that's doing something, whatever that is. Who can they go to if something is disrupting their life in this way? And so that's what the program's about. And we come back for a second time. And actually, we've had a number of disclosures that have come through this process. What that helps to do is it sets the stage that kids first know that it's good to talk about this, that it's okay to talk about this. So when someone's asked them to keep a secret that's this awful, that they don't have to keep it, that there's places they can go to. So that's more of an early intervention type program. The other thing we do is we go out and we do training, and we've done training with churches, we've done training with professionals, with other agencies, with community groups that just want to know more about child abuse, want to know more about how to receive disclosures, and we do that type of training as well. So again, let's not be scared of the language, and let's talk openly about child abuse. Let's talk about sexual abuse and sexual assault, because these are the realities that are happening in our world, and we do need to address them. And so how do we get people comfortable with that language so that we can actually move forward and address these issues and be healthier? And most of us, we all want our kids to grow up to pay their own bills, but to be healthy and to be happy. And so these are ways that we can do that. And so let's move that forward.
Wow, such important work that you all do down there at the Chinook Sexual Assault Center, and such a heavy topic. But thanks so much for being with us today, Christine.
Thank you so much.
Yes, appreciate having you on. Christine Cassie is the CEO of the Chinook Sexual Assault Center in Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.